What is happening, everybody? This is Dave Croft, and welcome to another episode of the 52 Qs podcast, your one stop on the internet for all things production and library music. It is so good to be with you today for a very special live Q&A episode here on the 52 Qs podcast for week 19, 2024. It is so good to be with you. We've already got a super happening chat room. I want to welcome Zen Chief Engineer, Royalty Free Music Collective, Source 4, Craig Gilroy, Mad About Nothing. Who else do we have? We have Pete Mason. We have Yella. Oh, Yella, thank you for spending part of your afternoon with me today. Jesse, Sharesh, Hose Music, Mad About Nothing. Yes, it is going to be a fantastic afternoon. JMO 112, what's happening? Mike Reinhardt, howdy, Yuka. Hey, Yuka, how are you doing? We're going to have a great day. Got a handful of questions from the community. We've got some questions already coming into the chat room, and that is what we are doing today. And just really appreciate you. And let's go ahead and dive in. Mrs. 52 Qs in the chat. What is happening? She's right downstairs, right? Hopefully she's chilling out by the pool. Maybe not. Maybe she's in her office working. But when I came back from lecture this morning and had some lunch with my boss, and I was like, you know what, Shannon, let's go jump in the pool. It's like already 97 degrees here. 97 degrees here in Florida, and I was not ready for that after having a super cool spring, and now it is immediately very hot. So we spent a little bit of time in the pool. So really, that was a lot of fun. Ms. Juju Beats, what's happening? Dex, really good to see you. Yeah, I'm surprised you're still awake, man. You're going to turn into a pumpkin here pretty soon. Yella says, watching the Eurovision Song Festival at the same time, so multitasking like a pro. Good to see you, Manuel. Thank you for joining us. Shannon... Shannon says a little bit too much sun. Yeah, I'm a little worried too. I think during the course of this live stream, you're going to see my head pinking up a little bit. Good to see you, Chris. Thomas, what is happening? Got a fantastic chat going on. So we're going to start first. Royalty Free Music Collective asked, first question. Reference tracks. How deep do you go? I always make sure to grab them all, which may not be strictly legit. Analyze one or two using a method I learned off Jesse. Reference tracks are, for me, the absolute key to sustainable creativity. If you're ever feeling writer's block, then chances are you haven't done enough reference work. It's like trying to withdraw money from an empty bank account. I think I said this last week. I believe that creativity is a finite resource that is infinitely replenishable by referencing. So how deep do I go? I kind of give it an inventory. I will, if we can assume that mood and emotion are governed by three things: harmonic structure, instrumental textures, and rhythmic language, then when we are doing an inventory or an autopsy or an analysis or whatever, we want to extract those three main aspects: the chord structure, how they're used, the relationship of major to minor chords, the how fast the chords are changing, how are those chords articulated, and then the instrumentation. Is it acoustic sounds? Is it synth sounds? And if they are synth sounds, what type of synth sounds? And then the rhythmic structure. How is the melodic? How's the melody voiced? How is the BPM? What is the overall swing pulse? Is it an eighth note straight, or is it a triplet, swing? And so mood and emotion is governed by those things. And in my mind, they're kind of all on a slider. And if you push one thing one way or the other, then you go from positive to uplifting, and uplifting to inspirational, and inspirational to happy, just by sliding a couple of those elements. And so I will listen to a reference and I will do an inventory of those things. If I'm looking to model the reference, meaning that I am going to use that reference as a structural blueprint, then I will go through and do measure by measure analysis. So in bar 1, these are the instruments that are sounding. This is what they're doing. This is the harmonic language being used. In bar number 5, this happens. And so then I will use that as a blueprint for my own cue. And so that's modeling. And so that's how I treat references. And I have found that if we do that, we very rarely, or I very rarely run into writer's block. Now, I might get burned out. I might be an empty vessel, but if I'm ever running out of ideas, that means that I am trying to withdraw from an empty bank account. And so the first thing I need to do is go and replenish it. All right, some other questions. Jesse asks, what target luffs to use for quiet music like a lullaby? I got to be honest, I've not considered a different luffs, whether it's a lullaby or not. It's usually governed by the library. And so editors can always turn things down, but turning them up can be a little tough, assuming things aren't overly compressed. And so I think the library, regardless of the genre, would communicate what that luffs should be, and in which case I shoot for about -14. Something a little bit, maybe a little softer, you might be able to get away with -15 or -16. But to be honest, I've never had a library tell me what type or what loudness they should shoot for that is dependent on the type of cue that it is. Okay. Dex says I had to turn off the Euro. Odd stuff going on there. All right. Miss Juju Beats asks, do I foresee a future where music libraries or editors might require Atmos mixed production music for certain projects? I foresee a future where it will be important. Once upon a time, mono, we only had to worry about mono, and then stereo came out, and now suddenly we had to really think of stereo. And I think there was a time where stereo was really exaggerated, and that has aged somewhat poorly, especially considering like the headphone world we live in. But you have to think back when in the 50s and 60s, when like stereo was a big thing, and you had these amazing jazz records with the bass player like far off to the left and the drummer far off to the right. And that feels weird. It feels really weird in our ears when we put on headphones. But you have to think back in the 50s, people weren't wearing headphones. They were putting the speakers up, in their house. And so you would have the natural blending of the acoustics as if there were a bass player on the left and a drummer like physically sitting on the right. So to answer your question, I don't think we'll be able to ignore it forever, but at this point, there needs to be a much larger installation footprint in the general population, I think, in order to require us to really dig into it. And production music is going to be somewhat last, because look at the type of shows that our music gets placed in. They're not necessarily going to do a 9.1 Atmos mix for Real Housewives of Atlanta, right? Dr. Pimple Popper isn't gonna need Atmos mixing for their little plucky dramedy placements. So yeah, I think I don't think we'll be able to ignore it forever, but I think it's pretty far down the totem of necessity for us. JMO asks, Dave, do you start with your main idea fleshed out and then backpedal to create the intro and build up, or do you build up from a small section and expand? That's a fantastic question. And it really depends on the type of cue. If I am writing a hip hop cue or even dramedy cues, we can kind of do this. I will actually create an entire loop section with my hip hop cues, especially. I'll create the entire loop section with all of the elements. Typically, with a hip hop, I will start with drums and an 808, or drums and a bass and some sort of harmonic progression, and then I will add a hook. Hook is almost always last, not always, but almost always. And I think this is just my my jazz background, learning how to improvise, and I write melodies very much like a jazz player improvises melodies. I'm listening to the harmonies and I am spontaneously creating melodic ideas in reaction to the harmonic language that I'm hearing. And I just work that enough over and over and over until I get something that is repeatable. Anybody who's ever watched my live streams has seen this process. And some of those cues that we were listening to during the beginning, it was like over and over and over, and it can be pretty painful to see. There was one that I almost gave up, but thankfully I didn't. If it is a tension cue, especially like an ominous tension cue or something like that, then I will paint kind of layer by layer. So it's like vertical composition versus horizontal composition. Anything that needs to slowly evolve over time, like tension cues or even trailer cues, then I will craft those generally layer at a time. An ominous tension cue, I will do the entire 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, layer by layer. Trailer cues, I will do kind of section by section. And so yeah, I hope that helps. Let's see. Matt About You says, I'm sure that happens when you do 20 of the same. Yeah, when you do several of the same types of cues, you definitely get into a rhythm. It's like learning to cook. And so when you're first starting, you have like the recipe card and you're like, oh, this and this ingredient. You might have to run back to the pantry and kind of go back and forth. But eventually you internalize that recipe and you don't have to necessarily reference it repeatedly. Yella says, hopefully I can make a few more trips to LA in the future to avoid the song festival. Well, Yella, you're going to be in LA for PMC, right? Because I'm going to be there. I'm gonna be there, and we need to grab a drink, man, for sure. That would be great. JMO also asks, Dave, what's the dream placement for you? World of Warcraft trailer? You know what? I have kind of a love-hate relationship with the music team at World of Warcraft, because for the longest time, Russell Brower was the in-house composer, and he's amazing. But during budget cuts and everything, they just kicked him to the curb. Right? I mean, this is a guy that, like, you know, jun 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 jun. Right? He wrote all of that stuff, and his Mist of Pandaria soundtrack is chef's kiss. It is peak Russell Brower World of Warcraft. So right now, I'm just kind of like, it's kind of like what they did with The Simpsons as well. The Simpsons fired Alf Clausen and then got Bleeding Fingers to do the music. I love Bleeding Fingers. I reference them all the dang time. Love what Hans Zimmer's doing in Remote Control Studios. Awesome. However, you got to do right by the people that brought you to the dance, right? So as far as the answer to your question, what is a dream placement? I think a theme. A theme for a Star Trek show or like a crime show, or basically any theme where I can unapologetically rip off Thomas Newman. But yeah, I would love to do some thematic stuff. Some main titles would be a real dream. Trailers, not necessarily. I find trailers to be exhausting to write personally. Some people really, really are charged by it. It's exhausting to mix. It's exhausting to write. And so I think a nice theme for a sci-fi show, for something, a cerebral sci-fi, I think would be really, really, really cool. I see some other questions coming through. Yella asks, is the apprehension engine of yours finished already? Oh man, I'll just wait for you to make one. And can you make one for me? Can I buy one from you? Well, what I'd like to do is jump to a question in the chat. Our question from the 52 Qs community, and Martin Ader asks, in hip hop music or in hip hop mixing, how do you approach getting the kick and bass to work together without clashing? I know techniques like EQing, tuning, and side chaining exist. Do you use some, or something else entirely? Once you have the kick and bass mixed, that sounds good to you. Do you reuse those settings for other cues, or do you start from scratch each time? Well, I tend to start from scratch a lot, but when you do several of these and use the mixing method that I've talked about before, where you flatten all of your faders and mix it essentially 3 times, you get to know elements of that cue very, very specifically. And so it's not starting from scratch. It's starting from a knowledge base that okay, I know epic orchestral is going to need this. I know when I do drum EQs, I'm probably going to have to add some of these types of things into the mix. So I've got a hip hop cue pulled up here. This is a cue that I wrote a while ago, I think sometime last year, called Grime Me a River. And I want to illustrate specifically the 808 bass, and let's bring up the E drums, right? And so the drums sound like this. And my treatise, especially with hip hop bass, is you have to get let me say this another way. You have to decide who gets to keep the low end. One sound gets to keep the low end. And when I'm talking low end, I'm talking 40, 50 hertz and below. One sound gets that range. Everything else has to get TF out of the way. Everything has to get out of the way of that low end. And so a lot of times I see, especially composers who aren't as familiar with mixing. I talk about this with my Full Sail students. They think, hey, I want my 808 to really, really, really like rattle my license plate. But they think by adding bass on top of it, that's going to accomplish that. But what ends up happening is you start creating phasing issues, you start creating masking problems, and it's a pain in the butt to mix because all of these low frequencies are all bouncing around and causing a world of hurt. So get the drums out of the way. Now yes, the kick sounds a little wimpy right there, but you have to understand it's not going to be heard in isolation. And so even if I have this like low piano sound, the low piano is out of the way. Let me open up all of these and you can see an unapologetic high pass or low cut across the board, except for, there it is, the one sound who gets to keep its low end. Everything else has to leave. Now, there are some other ways around it where you can do side chaining and all that. I only do side chaining to solve a problem the same way I only put EQs, or not EQs, but compressors. I mean, look at this mix. Other than, this jumble of plugins right there and this jumble of plugins, which admittedly are because I brought in some stock Logic, but like this, EQ, maybe a compressor, and even my mastering chain is just, it's comically simple. Because I think we overthink it. Now, I'm not saying like I'm the best mixing engineer in the world, but I think this sounds pretty good. And so when you watch tutorials and that kind of thing on YouTube, you have to make sure that it's really apples to apples that we're working with here, right? That if you're watching a tutorial about mixing, make sure that they're talking about mixing in an application that is relevant to what you're doing. Seeing somebody who mixes R&B vocals give you drum mixing advice when you're mixing EDM instrumentals, it might not necessarily be a one-to-one kind of thing. So I hope that helped. Thank you so much for that question, Martin. Really, really appreciate it. And did I see that Zen is Rick Elliott? Welcome. Jacob says, just turn up the kick above the bass. Yeah, just crank the fader. What could go wrong? Rick says, if I'm not familiar with mixing a genre, I would reference a volume matched track that I like in the genre. My technique is to listen to 5 of one and then mix for 5 seconds back and forth, listen for differences and make the needed changes. This technique has helped me a lot. Yeah, reference mixing is super vital. My method of mixing is from Bobby Ozinski, who has a ton of tutorials, a book on mixing, and his whole kind of frequency masking, complementary EQ curves to make sure that all the sounds kind of snap together like puzzle pieces. That's Bobby Ozinski. That's the way that he does that. Some other questions. I'm losing the chat. Sorry. It's why 3D films are still a gimmick. Not okay. Zen says, from my wife, why should I, her husband, become a paid member of 52Qs? Oh, that's it's hard to be unbiased there. Listen, 52Qs is a community of like-minded composers all together to help each other out. A rising tide raises all boats. I strongly believe that, and I strongly believe in mentoring. I believe in feedback. I believe in creative accountability. And 52Qs, it's why we're called 52Qs, is the idea of making at least one Q per month. I mean, we have different tiers, for community members. That's free. It's free to join. It's free to sign up and be in the community and see everything that we have all going there. If you are curious about kind of the writing process, then I think the neighbor plan, which is like $4 a month if you pay annually, it's $5 a month if you pay monthly. And I feel like you teed me up for a promo. But that's the live stream and the Production Music Almanac. The live stream is the bulk of that. And I mean, we have tons. And when I say tons, I mean tons of archives for the live stream. And let me pull this up here. Give me 1 second. Yeah, we have tons of archives in the live stream. I'm trying to pull it up, but trying to do too many things kind of all at once here. Give me one moment, everybody. Yep, here we go. All right, so, if we click on here into the composing of live streams, because I live stream for at least 2 hours every week. And so we have archives upon archives upon archives split out by the types of cues. So if you want to see like a no pits dramedy cue get made, there it is. And so when I say in the podcast hundreds of hours of archives, this is what I'm talking. Each one of these is minimum 2 hours. Minimum 2 hours. And so that's the neighbor plan. For the friends folks, I think if you're ready to really push into your career, but you're not ready for like weekly feedback and all of that, then the friends plan, I think, is a great idea. You get access to all of that stuff as well as weekly cue breakdowns, where I post in-depth breakdown of the cue, and you also get workshops. We just had a workshop just last week. Was it last week? Or was it? No, it was last week where we had Timothy Andrew Edwards come in and do a live Q&A. And so that was fantastic. And coming up soon is our publisher spotlight. That is coming soon. TM, right, where we will do a deep dive into publishers who accept unsolicited submissions and just to kind of give you some information. And so that's for the friends. For the family folks, I think that's really only for people who are ready to make a serious push into writing consistently. That's weekly feedback sessions. That is weekly office hours and access to the briefing room. And the briefing room is where we as a collective put albums together and start submitting. And so we're in the middle right now. We have a brief called Dating Room Drama, or Dating Show Drama, and there's the brief and all of that. And so different library splits. We've had cues that were submitted into the briefing room that have gone on to make air on the NFL, and those are all the past ones. We had the March Madness. We had TV promos with different libraries that I have a personal relationship with. And so it's mentoring. It's guided mentoring with feedback. And so that's the briefing room. So different tiers. And I didn't mean to turn this into a commercial. Honestly, I didn't. But yeah. So maybe Mrs. Elliott can, maybe that can help her. But if you have any questions, please let me know, man. Really, really happy to help out. Okay, looking at more questions. Am I going to take advantage of Logic Pro 11's AI instruments? I'm interested in trying it. The Logic Drummer Track is actually pretty good. I'm curious to see how much actual AI it is versus just tweakable loops, but I'm interested. I'm interested in it. Dex says a weird kick EQ I learned a while ago was to boost 5K. Took me ages to hear the difference, and yeah, I think it depends on the type of kick. The kick you hear. If it's like a low thuddy thumpy one, that might be a little tough. But yeah, Chris asks, am I cutting at 40 hertz? It entirely depends on, I'm assuming you're talking about here. Am I cutting at 40? It really, like I will, let me isolate the drums and the bass one more time. I will, that's a tubular bell. There's the drums. All right, so I'll kind of look and see where the large fundamental of the 808 is, and then where the kick, I'll bring the kick up until it kind of gets out of that way. So if my kick is, or my 808 kind of crests around unity right in here, then I will bring my kick and do an I'm not even sorry low pass or a high pass all the way up to that spot. But I'm not done yet, because what I have to then do is go back and notch out of the 808, out of the bass, so that what's left of the kick can really come through the mix. And that's what Bobby Owsinski calls complementary EQ curves. That's his term that I completely took. A complementary EQ curves. You're very welcome, Zen. Very, very welcome. Yella says, in my mixes, the only thing that keep the low subby frequencies are the drums and the sub bass. All others have a cutoff. Absolutely. I would even, depending on the drums, because I do so much with kind of orchestral hip hop, I have found that I even have to get like cinematic drums and stuff out of the way. But I'll do some side chaining or some dynamic sidechain EQ. So an EQ over here or a drum over here will push the EQ out of the way. And so I will do that. And yeah. Zen says he's great, wrote a ton of books. Talking about Bobby Owsinski. Yeah, he's amazing. His LinkedIn tutorials are required viewing in my estimation. And Rick says, gave her background on my IMDb. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. Dex says, don't join if you have pogonophobia. Uh-oh. All right. Somebody's going to have to define pogonophobia. Is that a fear of bald people? Well, because Rick's already bald and bearded. Dude, that's a prerequisite. We should give out. Shannon, let's add this to the store. Let's add little clip-on beards and white glasses that we can sell. And another thing that we also have over in the communities, we have masterminds, which are 12-week kind of intensive programs where we meet every single week, and we have discussion topics. And as a mastermind group, and they are limited to 6 people in each section, we listen to each other's cues and provide feedback. Yep. Nathan says, tons to be gained from watching the live streams. Yeah, the live stream. I know of some folks who will put the live streams on and just watch them in the background. Last night, we had a live stream that went for 2 hours, and I designed synth patches in Serum. Had never really done much of that before, but I was super inspired from, having John Audio on the podcast a while ago, super inspired by Matt Bowdler having just released another Serum pack. And this is a podcast topic coming up. So this is a little spoiler for everybody. I believe that composers being able to create some of their own original sounds is going to become increasingly more valuable moving forward, especially as AI comes and chews up the low effort music. Yep. I thought I saw a question about AI earlier. If I missed that, my apologies. Let's see. Checking out how long. I'm sorry. I'm a little ahead. Thank you, Source. Source, man, you're really, really, really nice. Nathan says, curious if one were to join Mastermind, would it also include friends or family access? No, but it does. At the end, you do get a month of family access for free, and so you can check it out with zero obligation if you'd like to do that. Yep. And we have a lot of folks who will try it. Some folks, it's not for them, and that's totally cool. And you don't ever have to buy anything from me. It's I want you here just to be a part of the community, right? I believe that give more than you take, and so that's kind of what Shannon and I are doing here. Source says it's not expensive from what you get. I learned something from every stream that Dave does. Yeah, the neighbors is kind of what the Patreon used to be, but since we kind of folded that in. Dex says, if you're half thinking about the mastermind, just do it. Really good fun and educational. Yeah, the next mastermind will start up in July, I believe, and it runs for 12 straight weeks. And if you're not ready to write for 12 straight weeks, then maybe wait for the winter mastermind. We do it every 6 months. And last winter, it started in January. We had 2 sections. We had a group that met at 7 a.m. and a group that met at 4:30 p.m. on Wednesdays. So yeah. Yep. Dave, do I have an interest in exploring analog hardware for my mixes? Interest, yes, but analog hardware is prohibitively expensive and fiddly. And you might notice a keyboard here in the background, and that keyboard is first of all, this is Shannon's 30th birthday present that is kind of too big for her office. This is a Korg Triton. And this up here, you can't really see it. That's a Yamaha DX7, which one of a good friend of mine and one of my publishers who is moving out of Orlando said, "Hey, Dave, do you want a vintage 1983 DX7? Complete with all the little carts and everything?" I mean, who says no to a vintage DX7? So I spent way too much time cleaning it up and figuring out how to get it into the Logic, and it sounds amazing, and the key bed feels amazing, but it's just kind of fiddly. It's just fiddly, and I feel like I don't have the time and energy to fiddle with a lot of it. But as far as like outboard mixing gear, no, not for what I'm doing. I think if I was, shooting to write music that I want to try to win Grammys with, perhaps, but no, I've got my 18 i8 here, and it's basic. I'm so basic. Let's see. So Dex says that paganophobia is fear of beards. Yep. In the future, one amount of AI during the production process will be crossing the line to feeling like you're cheating yourself. Think of AI the same way that we think of using loops. Okay? In that, if it's doing the work of creativity, the work of composition for you, then you are in muddy, murky waters, right? As far as cheating, I think that's between you and your muse. But if we are using loops to give the most creative lift, whether it's a hook, whether it's a chord progression, whether it's a bass line or whatever, then that's ultimately a dead end. That's a dead end. That is a cul-de-sac of creativity. And you might be able to knock out a handful of cues, but you sure as heck can't knock out a 40-year career out of it, right? A 30-year career out of it. So AI is kind of the same way. AI is the same way. That having been said, I have an interview coming up that I did with Aaron Collins from. I'm making sure. Yeah, Aaron Collins. For a split moment, I was like, "Oh my God, I'm flaking on her name." Aaron Collins, who is the VP of TV and Film for CSAC, and admittedly, she seemed a little nonplussed about AI, and her point was, you can't copyright AI. And no production worth their salt is going to take a chance and place uncopyrighted music in their shows. That's the ball game. That's the ball game right there. So for all of us hand wringing and worrying about AI taking our jobs, then no show worth their salt, meaning no show who has any kind of real budget and was going to pay you to begin with, they're not going to put a non-copyrighted piece of music in, and you can't copyright. You can't copyright AI music. So that's the ball game. End of story. Now, I think that we can use AI as tools the same way I would take a splice loop or something like that, but I can't depend on it to do the heaviest creative lifting. That's dangerous, in my opinion. Pete, sorry, I missed this question. Have you played around with the two current AI frontrunners, Udio and Suno, and what are my thoughts? I have played around a little bit with Suno, and my immediate thought was like Phil Tippett when Industrial Light and Magic showed him the CG dinosaurs, and he's been sitting there working with animatronic foam dinosaurs. I'm out of a gig, and I believe that us production music composers, and there's probably another podcast episode in this as well. I believe that we are facing our own Phil Tippett moments. And Phil Tippett, who was the stop motion animator, he's the dude that animated the Tauntauns, the AT-AT, that's him. He hand animated stop motion animation. That was him. He devoted his entire life to it. And he was booked and got hired by Steven Spielberg to do the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. Until ILM comes along and shows Steven Spielberg, Steve, can I call you Steve? The CG. And he was out of a job. And he went through months of like depression. He spiraled. I mean, it's a really touching story. Until he figured out that the talent cannot be taken away. What I've learned and what I know cannot be removed by technology. So what he did was figured out a way to leverage the technology. Let me say this a different way. Leverage his ability into the technology. And so they made little maquettes, is that the right term for it? Little puppets that fed directly into the computer. So we are facing our own Phil Tippett moments right now. And so it's not going away. John Philip Sousa famously hated player pianos because they were taking people's jobs. When jukeboxes, Shannon backed me up, when jukeboxes started showing up in restaurants, people hated them in bars because they're replacing bands. This is nothing new. The organ came around, and the reason that if you look at it like a pipe organ in a church, it says it's like the full orchestra. Here's my oboes and my flutes and everything, because part of the selling point for an organ for a church was replace your church musicians. And yes, we went from having 28-piece chamber orchestras in a church service to having an organist. But this is just technology, and we have to adapt. But Erin seemed confident that AI was not going to come and replace everything. But I haven't checked them out. So to answer your question, Pete, what did I think? I immediately thought, holy crap, this isn't, pardon my French, this isn't as shitty as I was hoping it would be. I really wanted this to be really terrible, like it was a year ago. But it still sounds kind of AI, right? And I've started seeing some music show up on Spotify, which is obviously AI. And I think the same way that we've been able to kind of suss out, we can tell from like pictures We can tell if we're looking at an AI image. I think the same is going to be true with sound. I think humans are uncannily aware of how other humans make art. Yep. Jesse says, what date in July does the mastermind start? We'll be traveling until the 3rd. I believe it's the 2nd week of July. Shannon, do you happen to have that date handy? And it might not be, probably July 8th, because July 2nd is Shannon and my 30th anniversary. Yep, 30 years ago, July 2nd, 1994, Shannon had poofy hair, and I had a little pencil beard and round tortoiseshell glasses, and we had our nuptials. So yeah. Jeff, that DX7, Jeff, I thought of you, brother. Man, if you were able to come to the family reunion, you could have played it. We set it up and everything, man. It was really, really great. But those carts are good. Yuka asks, what do's and don'ts for song cues titles? Especially, I would like to know about the don'ts. So titles, don't make your title too long. I'm talking like maybe 4 words. Don't use brand names. If you're writing for a specific show, don't put the show in the title. If you're writing for a specific sport, try to avoid using the name of the sport or terminology which overemphasizes that sport. I mean, I say that, but I have a cue called Red Zone Rundown that I wrote in 2015, and it got air in the NCAA tournament just last month. And it shows up in golf, and it has showed up in like collegiate lacrosse. So that's not a hard and fast rule, but don't make them too long. Don't use brand names. Don't depend on ChatGPT to give you good song titles or good cue titles, because I think they're overly generic. What I love, and I mean love, are good puns. Oh my God. I've been having so much fun writing titles for this dramedy, this European cafe dramedy album. And I have titles like Light as a Feta, Euros and a Half Shell. Here is Chow Time, with an assist from Dex for recommending that I spell time Thyme. Here is one called Pesto Changeo. And by the way, those are some AI images right there, right? That's a ChatGPT. Crepe Expectations, Quiche My Assiette. Here's one called Challenge Accepted. That's a epic hip hop cue. It's okay. But here's a Greek dramedy cue called Zat All You Got? What Are You, Alfredo? Why I like ChatGPT is like, I didn't need to know what a frightened bowl of Alfredo looked like, Pixar style, but now I don't have to guess, because there it is right there. Baklava that thing up and having ChatGPT write an image of a twerking piece of baklava. I didn't know I needed that in my life. Hole in oneness. I love good puns. Escargot, to be kidding. So yeah, I like good puns, and I cannot lie. But that with dramedy cues, it's really easy to get into some good puns. But I like to use alliteration, and I like to use wordplay. One of my favorite titles for tension cue is Stalker Texas Strangler. It's like a kind of a swampy tension cue, and so yeah, those are some do's and don'ts of titles. Let's see. I had another question also from Michael and Yuka Reschke. They ask, hi, Dave, I have a piano MIDI question. When you record piano, what is a good way to do it that it cuts down on editing later? It seems with non-weighted keyboards, velocities can end up all over the place no matter how hard you try. So do you ever have to go in and edit every note afterwards? Do I have to edit every note? Not necessarily, but I'll go ahead and tell you, Shannon, yeah, and I had hair in 1994. Little did I know that it was in 2 years, I went from that to shaving it all off. But Shannon, when we do her meditation stuff, because she is used to weighted keys, I almost always have to bring all of the velocities way, way, way down. I mean, the velocities have to go way down. And so by doing that, especially in Logic, because it kind of compresses the MIDI as you lower it, it doesn't not audio compress, but it kind of compresses the disparity between the highest and lowest velocities. It'll bring it all the way down. And then go in and hand tweak. I find myself having to tweak note placement a little bit more with Shannon stuff. And that's just because so much of it is spontaneous, kind of. Does it without a click for that kind of thing. Shannon says, don't rap my playing. No, not at all. It's just you're used to playing, acoustic piano, and when that muscle memory kicks in on a virtual instrument, it comes off pretty heavy-handed. Especially when I'm mixing it behind meditation and there's voiceover and everything. It's like somebody going ham in the background, so I have to bring it all back. But with any of my MIDI editing, I will play to a click, and then I will lock in the quantization and then ease the strength of that quantization versus trying to just kind of wing it. It doesn't really necessarily matter for Shannon because it's solo. It's by herself. She says, telling my secret. Sorry. Oh, sorry. Uh-oh. All right. You can have my leftover pad thai from lunch if that will make it up. Just know that it's medium spice, which is American hot, but Thai medium. So just so you know what you're in for. So I will lock in and then ease the quantization to keep some of the original performance. And it also depends on the piano VST that you're using. How responsive is it to velocities, and how, how many velocity layers you have. That can also make a big difference. But for me, I've said it here before, when you start getting those velocities really low, especially like on a felt piano, it gets all funky and mechanical sounding. That drives me absolutely insane. I cannot stand funky kind of sounds on pianos. And we listen to like piano music for like bedtime and that kind of thing. I'm just like, service your piano, people. Come on, man. Come on. Let's see. Yella just bought a DX7 this week. Just need to replace the capacitor, man. Well, good luck with that. The battery is no bueno on this one, and I don't know exactly what that affects. And I was like, I'll just swap out the battery. Surely it can't be that difficult. As soon as I saw the first video and they were like taking apart the key bed and pulling out motherboards and stuff like that, I was like, and nope. So I'll just deal with whatever the battery is. Thankfully, because Rob had this keyboard, it was in a case. The only thing that's one of the keys has a little chip in it, and that's literally it. But it's a lot of fun. It looks great, and like any good composer, I finally have, the tiered keyboards in the background. Now I feel like a real composer. Even though I spend most of my work like this with this key bed and this keyboard, even though I guess that's tiered keyboards. All right. Let's see. Any other questions? Loving all the questions. Dex says, please don't say nuptials like that ever again. And yes, my hair is no longer in my head. It is sadly around our ears. But I have a beard guy. I've talked about this before, right? I go to the Atomic Barber here in Winter Park, or in Orlando. It's in Winter Park, and it's like going back in time, man. It's like no cell phones are allowed. When you go in, they're like, hey, do you want a water? Do you want a beer? Do you want a soda? And I'm like, no, my appointment's at 11 o'clock. I think I can hold off on the beer. But I have a beard guy, and he spends an hour on my beard, and he does like hot towel treatments. He'll do the straight razor, and he will sit there like a sculptor with his little with his razor, and he'd be like, and he'll look back like, he'll add, and it takes about an hour, and it is like going back in time. And he also trims up my ears. That's really gross, but hey, I turned 50. As soon as I do an episode on turning 50, then I think all bets are off on that kind of stuff. And if you're not 50 and you're younger, you're going, ew. It's coming for you, man. It's coming for you. All right. Okay. Jesse wants some pad thai. Oh man, it is so good. It is so good. Kent, what is happening, Kent? Kent says, could I explain how layering string samples make them sound more realistic? That is a really good question. And I think I might be able to use this cue, which is called Grime Me a River, to kind of illustrate that. I don't know if it makes it sound more realistic as much as it does makes it sound a little bit more complex. In this example, I have stock Logic strings, which is just stock Logic full strings, and then I've layered in the stock Logic Kensington strings, which is their studio strings. And so the way that I think of it, the studio strings are a little bitey, right? They're a little too bitey, but the full strings feel too mushy. But I can take the bite from one library, the full ensembleness from another library, blend them together, and they sound tons more believable. And of course, using complementary EQ curves so that they kind of snap together. And I have brought out, like I'm bringing out some of the bite out of here. Yeah, those sound terrible, and they would sound terrible just by themselves. Meanwhile, the other strings would not sound great. I don't like them, but put them together. And so for me, blending string libraries is more about creating a little bit more of a richer sound and not depending on one library to do all of the lifting. Even on top of that, it creates a unique string sound, unique to you, because not everybody is going to layer those two string samples. And so by bringing two string sample libraries together, you create a string sound that is significantly more unique to you. And so yeah. I hope that helped, Kent. I hope that was super helpful to see that. Zen asks, being in Orlando, do you have to put in a dehumidifier in my studio? No, because our air conditioner does a really good job. If there's one thing Florida has figured out is AC, but it also means that our AC drip, like little drip pans and stuff, will clog up frequently because it's just gushing condensation out of the air. But I haven't really thought about it. I am now, but the AC does a pretty good job, to be honest. The AC does a good job. Yeah. You're very welcome, Kent. Happy to help. And Dale, yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. 30 years, man, 30 years. JMO asks, if Sora generates copyright-free video and builds in Suno to generate copyright-free audio, does that displace music supervisors? I don't think so. I don't know, because again, what network who values money to begin with is going to put that on their air? The only people who are really going to use that are people either like me, who I'm not going to necessarily hire an artist to make the stupid thumbnails, for like, I'm not hiring an artist to do that. I was using just clip art or something like that, or just my face, right? So instead, I just think it's kind of fun. Yes, I do spend too much time, I think, sorting all these out. But this one, I'm really proud of this one. The cue's called Quiche My Assiette. And if you ever wanted to know what a smarmy, smug, anthropomorphized quiche look like, there it is. You don't have to guess anymore. And so I would imagine, musically speaking, people who are going to incorporate Suno or whatever and stock video, little video clips, probably didn't put a high value on the video to begin with. So are they really taking money from you? Probably not. That's my guess. That's my guess. Do a refresh here. And if I missed any questions with all the chat going by, please let me know. Please, if you can drop that question again. I did have a couple of questions that have come up on the YouTube channel that I also wanted to take the time to answer. And Musician Ragu asks on my video about the MDR 7506 ear cups, asks, is this headphone the best for mixing and mastering, or is the M40X the best? The M40X, I think those are the Audio-Technica closeback. They're the Audio-Technica analog to the MDR 7506s. And I think any headphones can work for mixing and mastering as long as you know the bias of those headphones. And all headphones have bias. All headphones will boost frequencies, cut frequencies, or whatever. And the 7506s have a really sharp V to where it'll boost the highs and boost the lows. And as long as you know that, then you can mix counter to that. One of the reasons that I have switched from the 7506s to the MDR MV1s is because I was looking for an open back version of the 7506s. And so I discovered that the MV1s sound like the 7506s with the reference ID from SonarWorks, which is software, and it's a plugin that offsets the frequency bias of headphones. And so these sound like the 7506s with the reference works turned on, or reference ID, I forget what it's called. And I don't have to run software. I've never used the MV40 or the M40X audio. I'm a big fan of Audio-Technica. This microphone right here is an Audio-Technica, this little boom guy. And so they make good stuff. And it's only $99 for that Audio-Technica. So yeah, give it a shot. As long as you learn it, reference it, learn it. And I keep the 7506s around because anytime I do tracking, anytime I'm recording, the open backs will actually bleed into the microphones. So I don't use those. And then finally, another question off the YouTube chat. Artemix 9319 asks, cute cafe tune, curious why I orchestrated with 2 melodicas and a polka accordion rather than a harmonica and a musette accordion, which to my mind would sound more French. So he is talking about, or she, talking about these dramedy cues that I've been working on, like this one. That's probably, I forget which one was it, Chow Time? Yeah. And the reason I use a melodica is because I don't have an accordion. But even a melodic, a played melodica, which is this guy right here, in case you're not familiar with what a melodica is, this, and I look like I'm like a hookah bar or something, but Like just that little last articulation. Do you realize how hard it is to pull off something like that with MIDI to where it sounds even remotely believable? Or I could just go into a melodica. And so that's why I'm using the melodica and I'm faking the accordion by dumping chorus on it. Even with, was it Years and a Half Shell or is it Light as a Feather? It might have been. Well, it might be this one. And this cue, Light as a Feta, I'm going to be doing a breakdown tomorrow for the family and friends subscribers. And you can see where I have these multiple melodica layers, and I ran one of them through a Leslie cab, a spinning rotator cabinet, and it sounds just like a B3. Just like it's weird. So I can't wait to show you that. And why not a Musette accordion? Because I didn't find a Musette accordion sample library, and I'm only using the polka accordion in Chow Time here. Or it might have been Pesto Change. Yeah, just to add a little accordion shimmer to it. So yeah, I would love to use that stuff. If I had a Musette accordion, I would use it. And why not a harmonica? Because I am not nearly good enough on a chromatic harmonica to pull that off. And anybody who's watched the live stream saw me try it. Nope. I mean, it's all the same guts, you know. Melodica, by the way, there was a question. This is a cheap Hohner 32 Instructor. This is a student brand melodica that I got off of Amazon. And it's all the same instrument. It's basically metal tines that air passes over. Harmonicas, metal tines. Melodica, metal tines. Accordion, metal tines. It's just the shape of the tines and the size of the tines and how the air passes across it. In a harmonica, you are blowing air across each individual note. In an accordion, you have bellows, which is pushing and pulling air across two sets of notes. And with a melodica, you put in one end and it fires the tines and or it excites the tines that way. It's all the same instrument. And so you can fake it pretty well. At least I think so. I hope so. But I've gotten a ton of mileage out of that melodica, even though I feel really silly in a Peter Frampton talk box kind of way. And let's see. Dex asks, is it worth learning a headphone and stick with it 100%? Yep. When I first got these, it was an adjustment. Everything sounded too dull and too kind of dark, and I had to relearn it. The only headphone that I did not stick with is I got a pair of DT990s because everybody freaking swore by them, and I was like, yeah, I like them. I want to like them, and they're super comfortable. I think they're the most comfortable headphone I've ever had. I was looking for an open back set of headphones, but I could not get get on board with them. So yeah. But these are great. I love these. They're made of aluminum. That's not plastic. That's actually aluminum, and it's super lightweight. Nice chunky velour ear pads. These weren't necessarily the cheapest things, but yeah. And I don't have to run software and that kind of thing. Shannon says there's an art to selecting music to create moments and help the audience feel emotion. That's the primary job of a music supervisor and doesn't really have anything to do with selecting copyright. Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. Yep. There's music director kicking in. JMO asks, do I budget my quarterly royalties for month-to-month bills? No, just because all of my royalties go into a business account. And that also includes like subscription from 52Q members and everything. And that goes directly into paying like hosting fees and paying for like the Zoom account, paying for equipment, paying for like cameras and lights and that kind of thing. And so to date, I don't really think Shannon and I have drawn like a pay. We haven't drawn pay from that account. And so the royalties kind of go into that bucket. My month to month bills, like mortgage and everything, that's why having a full-time job really, really helps. And so that's one of the reasons I stay at Full Sail is I need that, the benefits and the health benefits, but also that kind of security. Craig asks, how long does it typically take to compose a straightforward cue, obviously excluding trailer music? I can knock out anywhere from a tension cue to a dramedy cue to a hip hop cue in 4 to 6 hours. And you'll see that on the live streams. Usually they're 2-parters, and so that'll be 4 hours. Maybe it'd be quicker if I wasn't, talking the whole time, but 6 hours, sometimes they go 3 parts. Early in my career, it took much longer. My very first season with the NFL on CBS, I was averaging closer to 12 hours per cue because I didn't know. And it was tons of revisions. I was super green. I was learning how to mix. I was learning how to wrangle my library. At that point, I was still relatively new in Logic because I had come from Ableton and Reason. But Full Sail was all Logic, and so that learning curve was also wrapped up into learning how to layer music and write good hooks and not step on dialogue and everything else. But 4 to 6 hours. Dex says, if I say musette, your mom will talk for 4 hours. Andreas bought a melodica because of me. It's already in 2 tracks. They're great. You can imitate chromatic harmonica. You can obviously imitate melodica. You can imitate accordions. They're super versatile. Dex says, sad times, gotten used to his 990s. Source4 says, try the Slate VSX. I used to be skeptical, but now I love them. I got to tell you, I have a fundamental resistance to having to run software to run my headphones. There's something just about completely analog that I don't want to add another layer. It's one of the reasons I wanted to get away from running reference ID, as I did not want to run software just to run my equipment. But some people freaking love it, and I'm down with that. Good on you, man. I've heard amazing things about the Slate VSX, but I just have resistance to running software so I can run my equipment. It's one of the reasons I'm probably not get into the modeling microphones. I'd rather save my pennies and get a pair of either Warm Audio 184s or Neumann 84s. I'd rather save my money and have the mics that I know that if my OS changes, it doesn't break my hardware, right? That's like I have anxiety just thinking about that. What happens when an OS update or a plugin update or something happens and it breaks your software? That's a real problem. Meanwhile, I've had these headphones I've had for almost 10 years. So I think software is great, and I love using software. I just mentioned how fiddly analog equipment is, but when it comes to like microphones and when it comes to headphones, I have a hard time. I have a hard time getting into modeling stuff. But that's just me. What is happening, Callum R90? Thanks for joining us. We're about wrapped up here. I want to make space. If there are any other questions, want to make sure that we leave space for that. In the meantime, let's listen to Keep Calm and Caddy On. This is a cue that was written for the Masters movie documentary. My 6th year, I think doing that, and it's a bespoke production music. I think I've talked about it on the podcast, and so this one, and the title is Keep Calm and Caddy On. It's a pun because you're gonna get a pun. And so for you British folks, I'm sure you can appreciate that. Keep calm and caddy on. But thank you so much for joining me today. And as always, a huge word of thanks to the family, friends, and neighbor subscribers who pay their actual real life money to keep all of this happening. It's one thing, for me to just come on YouTube and do a podcast and everything, but the community exists because of the support of folks who are again paying their real money to do that. And if that sounds like something that you want to help out with, either in an altruistic manner, or maybe you're ready to push into a real career and start moving the needle on your career in production music, then head over to 52Qs. It's absolutely free to join, but subscriptions start at just $4 a month. And we'd love to have you. And next week, we will be back to regularly scheduled programming next week, and I sit down and we have a special 2-part interview with the host of the Sync Gems podcast, Roy Matz. He is such a cool dude. He is such a chill, laid-back guy. Talk to him. He lives in Bali, and you wouldn't think, you'd think he is from LA or from New York, but no, he is from Bali, or he lives in Bali. Super cool dude. I highly recommend that you check out the Sync Gems podcast because he does really good work over there. And so we talked for over an hour, like an hour and 15, hour and 20 minutes. So we're going to split that up into our first ever 2-part episode. So be on the lookout for that coming up next week. But friends, that is going to do it for me. Once again, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this. And I talk about production and library music every week. And so if you've not yet subscribed, then you can subscribe right here on YouTube. Click the subscribe button, all of the usual YouTube goodness. And if you're listening to this on the podcast app of your choice, then maybe think about a 5-star review. Believe it or not, all of those things like thumbs up and everything, it really does help folks find us. Like I said, this wouldn't be possible without your help. Really, really appreciate everybody hanging out with me in the chat today. Mrs. 52Qs, anything else? Did I miss anything? I feel like we're pretty good. Did I say hi to everybody? Jenny, hi, Ronnie, Andreas, yep. Craig, really good to see you. Dale, what's happening? Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So that is going to do it for me. Have an amazing rest of your day. And I know for a fact that you are going to have an amazing rest of your day. Why do I know that? Because I know that the universe has amazing plans just for you. Until next time, peace. The 52Qs podcast is copyright 2024 818 Studios, all rights reserved. The music played on the podcast is copyright of their respective owners and is used with permission and for educational purposes only. For more information, including joining the community or becoming a member subscriber of 52Qs, head over to 52qs.com.